Good evening, I'm Laurie Johnson. Welcome to Houston Public Media's new web series, Political Perspectives. Every week, I'll be joined by show hosts and commentators Aiyer and Brandon Rottinghaus to discuss all things political. Tonight, we'll continue the conversation from Red, White, and Blue about the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, also known as HERO. So let's get started. Jay and Brandon, let's first off talk about what is HERO.
Well, HERO was written by the mayor and city council and passed a couple of years ago as an anti-discrimination ordinance. It defines certain categories, protected categories, and primarily sort of traditional things that you might think of, right? Race, religion, national origin, but it includes things like veteran status, disabilities, and it for the first time it included protections for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender communities. And I think the controversy around it really stems from the protections in that last category, transgender, and that's been the root of it. There was a petition drive to overturn that ordinance, which was successful, and so now this November we get to vote on it.
So, Brandon, one of the things that came up a lot in Red, White, and Blue was, what is this really about? Yeah. Is it really about discrimination overall, or is this about transgender issues?
Yeah. The state has been dealing with these issues as well, whether or not the protection for people who are, are religiously oriented and don't want to extend a marriage license to somebody who's of the same gender. These things are often pitched in a sort of religious overtone and used as a way to discriminate against people. Exactly why and how, we don't really know. This is something that obviously individuals have to make choices about, but the perception is that this is anti-gay, and this has been a sort of a common problem across the nation in dealing with these kinds of things. So Houston is in a position where they risk having there be serious backlash against this ordinance and against the city economically, probably, and that's something that I think really should weigh heavily on the minds of voters.
Is that really going to happen, though? As I think it was Dave Welch pointed out, have we seen any businesses fleeing Houston? Haven't we seen the exact opposite?
Yeah. It hasn't passed yet, and so I think we still don't know. We have evidence to suggest that the kinds of places that are not passing this tend to be places that are pretty conservative anyway. Houston's not in that category, right? Miami rejected one of these, earlier in 2000, and this isn't the kind of characterization that you want to have. So this is something I think that is potentially problematic, right? There's no guarantee it's going to happen, but this could happen.
I think Brandon and I were talking about this earlier. One of the things that's a little bit telling, or should give some people pause, is that we haven't seen that widespread support from sort of non-traditional progressive groups, right? While folks like the Greater Houston Partnership have come on board, we haven't seen kind of the civic leaders in terms of the business community, an individual CEO. We haven't seen Bob McNair of the Texans. We haven't seen Les Alexander from the Rockets. We haven't seen public business leaders, especially ones when we're talking about Super Bowl and the NCAA. We haven't seen them come out and weigh out in favor of HERO. And I think that's a big telling point. I think it would be interesting to see what those community leaders, because I think they'll have, if you're going to make an argument you're going to lose a Super Bowl, then it probably you would expect that the owner of the Texans would come out and say, hey, let's pass this. Yeah.
This could be a very narrow group of interested parties who are saying that this is wrong, and it could be the voters simply don't care. And we were talking about this earlier too. Looking at the ballot language, it has sort of very clear upfront discussion about this is a non-discriminatory ordinance, and if you read it carefully, it gives you some details about how and why that happens. It all looks good on paper. No one's in favor of discrimination, but the implications to that, which some of the anti-HERO folks have brought out, could develop into a kind of hot button political issue. So that, I think, is the real complication here. We don't know what the real coalition against looks like. We don't know what the coalition in favor looks like. There are lots of sort of questions.
Why isn't this generating more interest among voters? I would think that this would be one of those issues that would drive people to the polls.
Well, it's been a slowly evolving race, because part of the problem was it was caught up in sort of this long process legal argument, right? It had gone up, it had come down. The Supreme Court finally vacated the original ruling and validated the petition drive that finally put it back on the ballot. And so I think, to be blunt, I don't know that the mayor's office and others had really expected it to be on this November. I think they kept thinking they could delay it, and then they made I think to some extent a calculated mistake. So it's now on it. but the good news is you have a really short window of time. So that's a short window of time to raise a lot of money, to build up awareness. Now, I would tell you, I think that the anti-folks have done a pretty successful job in defining the campaign and defining the issue as sort of a bathroom ordinance. I mean, you hear that term used. We heard Dave Welch refer to it in that context. And that's what the pro-hero folks are really fighting against. This idea that this is there's a boogeyman that's going to come into the bathrooms and it's going to be a dangerous situation for people.
I've heard a lot of radio spots along those lines. And is there an advantage to one group or the other getting more attention out? In other words, do the pro-hero folks do better if they just don't really do much of anything, or do they need to be getting their message out too?
Yeah, this is a really good question. There hasn't really been, I think, exactly right, from as Jay's point, that there are kind of serious political entrepreneur willing to say we should stand up in favor of this. Even the mayor, who I think really is probably the biggest proponent of it. If we saw that, I think you would definitely see kind of more of a fight, right? There's more conflict at that point. But without that kind of give and take, it's been mostly anti-folks saying that this is a bad thing to do. The closest we've come is in the mayor's race, right, where Ben Hall has been very against it. And even that has been something that's sort of low profile and has been qualified by the fact that maybe he's a Democrat, maybe he's a Republican, we don't know. So some of the confusion about where the politicians stand, I think, is one thing. Some of the confusion about the ballot, if it's actually going to be on the ballot, the Supreme Court saying yes, it has to come back. And so lots of these sort of confusing ideas, I think, is maybe for the voters just them throwing their hands up in the air and not knowing what to do. If
there is a big turnout over Hero, how does that affect the mayor's race?
See, that's a great question because we don't know. Because the conventional wisdom is that the energy on this race is on the anti-side, the anti-hero folks. So if you see a surge of voters in the city that are coming out entirely against Hero, well, where are they? Where are they located? Is there a partisan angle to it? If they tend to be more conservative, Republican-oriented voters, it would favor, I think, one of two candidates, either Ben Hall or likely Bill King, since they're really defined as a conservative voters and have taken positions to varying degrees against Hero. If the surge is a result of kind of just everyone voting who normally would vote, it may be a wash. It's not out of the realm of possibility to see a situation where a candidate, where a constituent or individual would vote against this Hero, but vote for a more progressive candidate, whether it's Sylvester Turner, Chris Bell, Stephen Costello.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've got statewide issues that involve constitutional amendments which could be affected. So if you have an upped conservative turnout, it could be that some of those don't go. We have local ballot initiatives too that could be at play. There's an extension of the term of office for the city council members that could be that they vote against that. That would be not out of the question. There's also bond elections going on countywide that could be an issue as well at play. So I think that's exactly right. We don't know, but if it is the case that you see a tremendous turnout in terms of the conservative vote, then that could dramatically change how things stand. But I'll do you one better. If you think about this in the context of the kind of larger perspective of Harris County and Texas turning blue, this is a meaningful election because this is where the voters are going to be. And if it's the case that Battleground Texas, the Texas Democratic Party, Texas Organizing Project look at low turnout in this election among Democrats, then it could be complicated to try to find funding in the future to move forward. So in a way, this provides a kind of potential bridgehead for issues going into the future.
And to sort of follow up on what Brandon said as well, the other thing to think about is this is really what we're seeing here is a national movement, right? We saw a change in gay marriage in terms of the Supreme Court. We've seen sort of a perception, I think, from on the right that the culture has shifted away from them. And I think that's what part of this issue is among some of the conservatives that are leading the efforts against Hero. This is their opportunity to kind of stem the tide. This is where they're seeing it, and they're gonna put their foot down. And you see it with the religious liberty arguments that are being made, with issues related to the issuance of marriage licenses. Gay marriage is legal. To my knowledge, Republican and conservative office holders who have judges are not conducting same-sex marriages. So it's very much a divided issue. So how is this playing itself out? It's playing itself out in this ballot initiative. It's playing itself out where we don't have a leading Republicans willing or able to come out in favor of Hero. It's become a de facto partisan issue here.
One more question. If this should pass, if HERO is approved, is it open to more legal challenges?
Yes, I would say yes. You're already seeing arguments being made that the Texas legislature would come in when they're in session and kill it, much in the same way they did an anti-fracking bill that took place in Denton last session. You're seeing limitations based on that. And I think, if anything, you could make an argument it might fuel a religious liberty bill that comes to the legislature.
Yeah. I'll defer to Jay since he's the resident lawyer here, but I'll say that too. I think you're exactly right. I mean, what you've got here is a scenario where Republicans in the legislature have to consider local control versus a kind of ideological predisposition towards being against an ordinance like this. So for fracking, for the bag ban, plastic bag ban, for the bullet train, these are all issues that pit local control versus statewide control. So we could see some friction there developing in the Republican Party, and maybe they have to find some internal coalition that's going to be, in favor of keeping it local control, and that's the real question here. So it does have implications beyond, just kind of what happens in Houston.
Okay, great. Well, Brandon, thank you so much. Jay, thank you. And thank you for joining us this evening. Remember to log on to houstonpublicmedia.org/perspectives every Friday night at 8 p.m. following the 7:30 broadcast of Red, White, and Blue. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again next week. Good night.